People all around the world continue to send well wishes to the Carter family, words of comfort and support as they revealed former First Lady Rosalynn Carter has been diagnosed with dementia. Today, the Carter Center says she's at home in Plains, Georgia. She's with her husband, former President Jimmy Carter, who spent the last 3 months at home in hospice care. Over the years, Rosalynn Carter has been one of the nation's leading advocates for mental health and patient care. As 11 Alive's Christy Diaz reports, with word of Rosalynn's diagnosis, her light is shining brighter than ever.
Naturally, there is some sadness there at this news, but also pride. This topic, people living with dementia and their caregivers, is a population Mrs. Carter has been fighting for over 50 years. And this announcement of her own diagnosis of dementia is just one more step forward in her legacy of reducing stigma and starting important conversations. It takes a special person to tackle an issue shrouded in shame and stigma. But 50 years ago, Rosalynn Carter brought mental health out of the shadows and into boardrooms and government chambers and kitchen tables. The Rosalynn Carter Institute for Caregivers CEO, Dr. Jennifer Olson, has seen this firsthand.
I think that's what's so incredible about Mrs. Carter's work. Both mental illness and caregiving were issues that were rarely talked about.
I recently traveled to Americus to talk to Dr. Olson about Mrs. Carter's decades of work.
It's the greatest honor of my life to be able to work for an incredible 95-year-old woman. She gently nudges you towards making big things happen.
Now, at 95 years old and facing her own diagnosis of dementia, the former First Lady leads by example, pushing the conversation forward once again.
This is another example where the Carters are leading the way and being open about what they're experiencing, which I think is so courageous.
It's just part of a process of hoping that families around the dinner table and around the doctor's offices can have conversations.
Many of the services and legislation of present day are available because of Mrs. Carter's relentless fight. She co-founded the Carter Center, which has a mental health branch. She testified before the Senate, worked on the Georgia Mental Health Parity Act, and created the Rosalynn Carter Institute for Caregivers on the campus of Georgia Southwestern, where Mrs. Carter went to school.
She's put her name next to this population in a way that creates a visibility that otherwise wouldn't exist.
As the announcement about Mrs. Carter's diagnosis sinks in, advocates know now is when the work begins.
The window has opened, and our job is to seize this moment and to do something about it.
Just as Mrs. Carter would want it. You know, Mrs. Carter has a famous quote, to paraphrase, basically says there are 4 types of people in this world. You either are, have been, will be, or will need a caregiver. And that rings even truer today as Mrs. Carter likely taps into the resources for which she has fought for so many others. Back to you.
That's so powerful, Christy. Thank you. 1 out of every 9 of us will be diagnosed with some form of dementia in our lifetime, and it's nearly certain that the disease will impact someone we love at some point in our lives. 11 Alive produced an entire series on dementia in conjunction with the Carter Center Fellowship on Mental Health Journalism. Desperately Waiting examines how these diagnoses impact people all over Georgia, the hurdles to better care, and the hope for a cure. You can watch Desperately Waiting right now on our website. We also have more resources to help you and your loved ones right now for you on 11alive.com.